Hey y'all, Scott here. You ever stare in front of the mirror and practice what you're about to say to somebody?
Hey, you know what they say, go yourself.
Well, I'm practicing what to say at a family reunion that's coming up. They'd probably say, oh, Scott, it's been so long, talk to me. And I'd go, Dimensions, oh, my favorite. You know, 2D just kind of happened. Nobody went, flat plane, no Z-axis. People have always been after that, their third dimension. It's the future and the solution to all your problems in marriage.
These never work.
The dimension of our dreams, and when we finally got it, I miss garbage. I mean, we could go back before 2D gaming to no D. These were the days. Who are we kidding? It's always been a battle between 2D and 3D. You could argue 4D gaming is something like virtual reality, but I will categorize 4D like movies and theme park rides do. If my chair moves, that's the fourth dimension. Maybe someday we'll get a true fourth dimension in gaming, but for now we gotta settle for Frogger 3D being the farthest we can go. These days, it's 2D and 3D living in harmony. But it wasn't always like this, at least on home consoles. It seemed like for a second there that 2D was merely a product of hardware limitations. The only reason to make a 2D game is if you're making it for Game Boy or something. If you were making a game for the PlayStation 2, GameCube, or Xbox, you knew what dimension to make it. 3D was kind of seen as the new norm for modern console games, but now that status has been changed by Kirby Star Allies. 2D games are everywhere, sitting right alongside 3D ones, but how did it get this way? Well, like I said, 2D games just kind of happened. Do you really think there was a board meeting?
Graphics.
This was just what video games were at the time. This was the extent of what could be done, but 3D was still the dream of many. What if these characters weren't flat? They could walk around in a world, not just some kind of stage play. For 2D games, the top-down perspective was usually the answer to prayers like that, but everything was still so flat, and there were only so many things you could do and places you could go. At the time, though, this was perfectly fine. But then gunshots were heard. Super Mario 64 defined 3D gaming. It existed beforehand, but did it? Most 3D games had a hearty dose of quotation marks involved. They definitely were more 3D than not, but too many 2D elements were involved to truly make them feel like there's no going back from this. Sonic 3D Blast. Yeah, okay. Wolfenstein 3D and Doom laid the foundation for the modern first-person shooter utilizing 3D environments, and while consoles dabbled in 3D games prior, the PlayStation and Sega Saturn helped popularize them as a standard, even if these consoles did 2D games a bit better. A system like the Sega Saturn wasn't designed around 3D gaming. It was supposed to be a 2D sprite powerhouse with 3D effects for the backgrounds and such. But they saw the writing on the Christ! If your console wasn't capable of playing 3D games, well, Thanksgiving's gonna be awkward. This was where the industry was heading, but even though all these 3D games were releasing, they weren't fully taking advantage of this new dimension. They almost felt like 2D games at their core, just with 3D models instead of sprites. Oh, some games just used 3D models but stuck to a 2D perspective. But in came Mario 64, showing just how game design had to evolve. It wasn't the first 3D game, but it might as well have been. It was a monumental moment for gaming. I should know, I wasn't there. But have you noticed around this time, 2D became somewhat of a product of limitations? It almost felt like 3D replaced 2D, and 2D became relegated to handhelds because that's all they could do. Most flagship gaming franchises during this time felt the need to transition to 3D, and 2D was seen as old news. The only person that would care about them would be Lincoln, and he's dead! Of course, I'm mainly referring to game series that used to be 2D adventures, which evolved when 3D was becoming widely utilized. Something like Dr. Mario 64, it makes sense as to why it's just a simple 2D puzzle game, but out of all the action-adventure titles released on the Nintendo 64, I can only think of a handful of games played from a 2D perspective. Yoshi's Story, Mischief Makers, Kirby 64, you have Super Smash Bros. And other fighting games, but that's pretty much it. If you wanted 2D Mario, Zelda, or Donkey Kong, you had to play those on Game Boy. It really felt like Nintendo was pushing most games to just be 3D on the 64, which does make me wonder why they kept Yoshi and Kirby 2D during this time. Well, they still used 3D graphics, but kept the playing field 2D. You can only go left, right, up, or down, which created the term 2.5D. What's half a Z? It's a 2D game with 3D graphics, or a 3D game played from a 2D perspective. Deb, pay attention. The PlayStation and Sega Saturn kept 2D games on consoles alive during this era, and this is where we got some of the most gorgeous sprite art ever conceived. It was brilliantly mixed with visual effects and backgrounds that only these new systems could achieve, and showed that 2D gaming wasn't just a step towards 3D. They were two different beasts deserving the same amount of attention.
We're
This is the era I'm talking about when I refer to the fall of 2D gaming. The PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and Dreamcast. If you were making a game for these platforms, it was almost certainly 3D, and if you wanted to make a 2D game, get in the car. 2D games were seen as for handhelds only, and by proxy, less important than the big 3D console games. Case in point, all of these franchises that originated in 2D all got games during this generation. Not a single console entry was 2D. Now, of course, what's the big deal? The 2D games didn't go away, you got those games on the handheld. It's like this label, what's there to question?
What is this, moonshine or porn?
Your 2D games never left, you just had to play them on the handheld. But because of that, they didn't feel like they were considered as important as what was on the consoles. Console games have always been the priority. Sure, you got 2 Zelda games on the Nintendo DS in between console entries, but literally every time people talk about the history of Zelda games, they always say, Twilight Princess came out, then Skyward Sword. It's almost like handheld games were treated as spin-offs sometimes, even if they had just as much, if not more integrity as whatever released on consoles. But in the end, they just weren't considered as important as console games. These handheld titles sold more than their console counterparts, but you'll barely hear people talk about the portable games. It's all about the home console ones. It's something that's always perplexed me. I always see Nintendo, Sega, Capcom, Sony pull from their classic home console games for nostalgia bait, but barely ever do so with their handheld titles by comparison. Well, I guess it's because normally console games get the bigger budgets, the bigger teams, and the bigger scopes because they can handle experiences of that size, and thus they're the bigger deals. Portable systems couldn't do as much, so budgets for games were generally smaller, and thus people generally saw games that released on handhelds as lesser and not as important than the console games. Grand Theft Auto Advance released the same day as San Andreas. Guess what happened? Most of the time, handheld variants of these series would be put in sub-series, with the console entries being direct sequels to one another. Basically, the most a lot of these handhelds could get would be prequels, side stories, etc. Systems like the Game Boy Advance could do some very light 3D stuff, but 2D was where it was most comfortable, so this was how 2D lived on at the time. Now, that doesn't mean 2D was completely off the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. The Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures on GameCube had a graphical style incredibly reminiscent of A Link to the Past on SNES, though now with all kinds of effects and crumbs on the screen. Looking at reviews, critics liked a lot about it. Outside of the graphics. A series that consistently were 2D only skipped main entries on consoles during this time. Classic Mega Man, Kirby, Yoshi, and when they wanted to do something like a new Mega Man X game, X7 was this new experiment bringing the series into 3D, with the next entry showing us just how well that turned out. X8 brought things back to a 2D perspective, releasing around 2005, which is where the rise of 2D started to occur. Xbox Live Arcade initially started out on the original Xbox, hosting games along the likes of arcade classics and some original very simple games. You could download these games for a relatively small price, but when it made its way over to the Xbox 360, it blew up. Xbox Live Arcade became a breeding ground for smaller, bite-sized games, not just classic arcade titles. It helped create a market for simple, cheap experiences on a home console. Much like how the pick-up-and-play games worked well on handhelds, they worked just as well as downloadable games on the TV, as you could just hop into them, play them for a bit, and hop out without swapping discs. This was a godsend for retro stuff, making the classics easily accessible to the masses. Instantly downloadable, the games were smaller in file size and simpler due to their age, which made them perfect to just always have at a moment's notice on our 360s. And I think this got people to realize, wow, this isn't dog 2D retro-styled games still had a place on the home consoles. There's merit to these games existing right alongside the big bombastic 3D ones. So original downloadable games were starting to get pumped out for the marketplace, some of which were retro reboots of classics, others completely new concepts, all for affordable prices. If you haven't played Peggle because of budget constraints, that's your fault.
The bank is repossessing my body.
And I think the boom of downloadable smaller games showed how much value these titles still had. A game like Bionic Commando Rearmed was far more popular than the big, gritty Bionic Commando reboot it was fundamentally made to advertise. 2D games like this were finally making a comeback on consoles, though they were still being seen as worth less than 3D ones. The Xbox Live Arcade era really messed up my perception of price points, as back then they would charge like $10 for a new Space Invaders. Now it's like, I know it's in a collection, but still, It makes me look at something like Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, that released in 2021 for $30 digitally, and I'm not saying it's not worth it. I'm saying the unbelievably cheap prices of digital games from this era makes me initially look at this as overpriced. 2D games were still seen as inferior in value to 3D titles. In fact, that just goes for various things in general during this era. Downloadable games were seen as lesser than retail games. Indie games were worse than AAA ones because they would always denote on storefronts that this was an indie game, this was an Xbox Live Arcade or PlayStation Network or WiiWare game. And thankfully, eventually, they just said, why are we giving these games labels? They're all just games at the end of the day. Who cares if it doesn't doesn't have a retail presence. Who cares if it was just made by one person? They should all be given the same label, not, oh, well, this is just a downloadable only game, or, oh, this is an indie game. How about, these are all Xbox 360 games? And I think that mindset helped 2D games in the long run, as they were primed for indie development.
What's the recipe for surprising the kids, treating yourself, and ditching dish duty? You're looking at it. Order your Pizza Hut faves like original pan, original stuffed crust, and more at pizzahut.com. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
At SteelSeries, we make the headsets, mice, and keyboards that the world's best gamers win the most with. And we've been doing it since way back. It's up to you how far you go, but whatever you do, go for glory.
Pizza Hut stuffed crust is the crust that made crust good. Topped and stuffed with over a half-pound of cheese. What are you so afraid of? Loving it? Original stuffed crust, just $12.99. Only from Pizza Hut. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
Is easier and cheaper to develop at its core and in general compared to 3D. Now, because of that, you may say, well then obviously that's why the perceived value of a 2D game was lower, because they're easier and cheaper to make. And for some reason, people keep pushing that old deal out. Because it's 2D, it should be cheaper. It's easier to make than a 3D game. Yeah, okay, look up the most expensive and difficult to make movies of all time. Chances are, they're the same price to watch as the Poltergeist of Borley Forest. I guess movies may be a weird comparison. I think a comparison people don't make enough are actual games. With 3D games, there's more that can go wrong. 2D is more grounded, there's only so many possibilities. 3D, there's more to take into account, adding to developmental issues. But from what I've seen, due to that, 3D games have so much more fluff, more cutscenes, boring tutorials, parts of the gameplay that are just you walking and following somebody and doing nothing else. Does it really matter? I have full control of what I do and where I go in this environment if there's nothing to do and nowhere to go? I'm just holding up here. A lot of these 3D games like to give you the illusion of being much more than what they really are. 2D, you can't do that as much because it's more obvious when you do it. You can't bullshit as much as you can with 3D games. And I know this sounds like I prefer 2D, and no, I like both of these equally, but as more and more time passes, it's easier and easier to call 3D games out on their garbage. Like the first time this little narrow hallway passage thing happened, I thought nothing of it, but the 60th game that did it this year? It's obvious this is here to not only mask loading screens, but also increase the time spent playing the game, even if it's only by a few seconds. Which making any game that lasts hundreds of hours, it's tough. But in a 3D world, you have more space to do more things. A 2D experience can only be consumed in so many ways, which I think adds to the perception that a 2D game is worth less than a 3D one. So regardless of 2D games coming back to consoles in a more substantial way, they were still seen as games that could only be $20 or less. However, I think the main company pushing forward, trying to give 2D games the same value as any other AAA release, is Nintendo. For a while there, Nintendo sort of pushed their 2D games off to their handhelds, which again, devalued them a bit. If you wanted 2D Zelda or Mario, you mostly had to get a Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, but even then, with Mario, from 1992 to 2006, there were no original 2D games produced. They just did remakes and re-releases on the portables, which it's crazy to think there was a time when 2D Mario was basically extinct. What Nintendo did instead was invest heavily into the Wario Land series. That was their premier 2D platformer for a bit, but in 2006, Nintendo revitalized 2D Mario with New Super Mario Bros. On DS. It was a sales juggernaut and helped prove that there was still a big audience for original 2D games. With the casual appeal of systems like the DS and Wii, it became more apparent than ever how many non-gamers understood 2D gaming far more than 3D. 3D, you have to worry about a camera system, and it's like, I already have a mortgage to deal with. A game like the original Super Mario Bros., most players could deal with. Hell, many found it fun. Super Mario 64? Join the occult, Dad! While millions experienced and enjoyed video games, I think this era proved that 2D wasn't just an evolutionary step to take to get to 3D. It was something that was preferable in many ways to millions. It was simpler to understand for casual players, and as great as 3D was, it was too different from 2D to be considered a replacement. I think some people almost looked at going from 2D to 3D gaming as the transition from black and white to color and film. 2D was mostly relegated to systems that just couldn't do 3D. But in reality, revitalizing 2D games was the ticket to grow gaming that much more. While the Nintendo DS could do 3D games, most of the major titles released on it were still 2D, even if they used 3D character models. And on the Wii, Nintendo started to pump more and more money into AAA 2D console games. This all started with Super Paper Mario in 2007, reimagining the Paper Mario RPG series as a 2D platformer with RPG elements and a gimmick showing you the 3D perspective of your 2D plane. Or maybe it didn't start it, but it showed where Nintendo was heading with many of its key franchises. Backwards! Nintendo has always been a very nostalgia-heavy company. Many times they theme their games around, remember that? But that doesn't mean there can't be any innovation with their nostalgia-heavy titles. Their next major 2D console game was Wario Land Shake It, also known as Wario Land The Shake Dimension in Europe. It's offensive over there. Wario Land didn't do much sales-wise, but it was a gorgeous 2D platformer on a console with great cutscenes, artwork, and animation. It was clear more time and money were being put into games like this. Even if the title didn't sell well, the intention was there. This was the first Wario Land on a console, and they went above and beyond to make it feel like it. We got Wario World on the GameCube, a 3D Wario platformer, but Wario Land Shake It was traditional 2D as all hell, which was an important precedent to set, because 1 year later, Nintendo went all in on 2D console gaming with New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I remember my aunt wanted a Wii because, well, I loved Super Mario Bros. It clicked perfectly with the Wii's casual appeal. An old school Super Mario Bros. Game, a title like Mario Galaxy, you're gonna give grandma a stroke with that. It didn't matter that it wasn't as visually appealing or epic and grandiose as the biggest games on the market at the time. New Super Mario Bros. Wii proved that people wanted simple 2D fun on their TVs just as much as on their handhelds. Plus, Nintendo introduced simultaneous multiplayer with this game, which became a staple in their modern 2D titles to come. Next year, we got Donkey Kong Country Returns and Kirby's Epic Yarn on Wii, Kirby's Return to Dreamland the next, and coupled with the Wii's downloadable library of old school NES and SNES games, retro-style new downloadable WiiWare titles, and the lower cost of developing games on it compared to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, the Wii became the go-to console for the resurrection of 2D console gaming. Nintendo definitely noticed that these 2D titles appeal to far more consumers than ever before. You satisfy the casual crowd with simpler games they can understand. The hardcore community is pleased by the return to the classic era of gaming, pop a multiplayer mode on there, and all's forgiven. So because of this, Nintendo made another 2D game. And another 2D game, and another, 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 and another. Nintendo leaned too far into 2D gaming after the success of New Super Mario Bros. Wii. It just felt like they took their 3D games and pushed them off to the side. And even when they did do 3D games, they took too much inspiration from the 2D ones. The Wii U and 3DS, frankly, had too much 2D. From 2012 to 2016, it almost felt like every other game Nintendo was making was a 2D platformer. And they're great, but my God! We went from not enough of them to too much just like that. And you know what? I get it. These 2D games were obviously a smart move because 1, they had wider appeal, and 2, they were definitely easier to develop. Like, why wouldn't you make the game that'll cost less to produce and make more money? But that's the problem. Many of these didn't feel like artistic decisions made because they wanted to make a 2D game. They felt like business decisions. Make a 2D game because it's more cost effective, and with a mindset like that, many of the 2D games that came out this generation, while crazy fun, weren't necessarily exciting in terms of what they represented. They felt like another Nintendo game and that's it. Which I think this was one of the factors that led to Nintendo's underperformance during this generation. The 2D games have wide appeal, but generally speaking, they don't leave the same impact as a 3D one. Nintendo's 2D output felt safe, not cutting edge, but when they would put out a 3D game, they'd knock it out of the park, which just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth concerning their output of 2D platformers. Because it's obvious they can be so much more. Just look at what indies are doing. Some of the most ingenious concepts to ever grace gaming are coming from just a few people working on their own, and they're being put into 2D titles. And thankfully, the industry started to evolve. What used to be considered just indie games have become games. Some of the biggest modern successes in the industry come from them, and many of which are 2D games, ones that take inspiration from what studios did years ago, games that they just aren't as willing to put too much time, effort, and money into anymore. And these indie developers help to prove that some genres never die. Just because Castlevania and Metroid gave up for a while there doesn't mean there isn't a market for classic Castlevania and Metroid games like this anymore. The Xbox One's most iconic exclusive, in my opinion, was Cuphead. Donkey Kong Country came back with returns on Wii and Tropical Freeze on Wii U after the series was just in a dormant state of spin-offs and re-releases, and it came back to glowing reviews and great sales. These types of games always have a place in the market, and with handhelds and consoles becoming one, we've seen far more games that normally would have probably released on something like the Nintendo 3DS now appear on the Nintendo Switch alongside games like Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey. We see these games appear on PlayStation 4 or 5, Xbox Series X and S, and they don't feel out of place, which is awesome. Every game on the PlayStation Store has the same worth of each other. They're all games, and the entry level of printing a game on a disc obviously was lowered as we received so many more physical releases of smaller budget titles that normally would have been digital only. That led to more indie 2D games getting released this way. Even if it was in a limited fashion, a physical release still goes a long way in showcasing the value of said product. And with Nintendo showing there was a market for high quality 2D games on console, we've entered a bit of a 2D gaming revival renaissance within the past decade. Now, 2D Mario and Zelda can live side by side with their 3D counterparts on the same console. Games like a classic 2D Mega Man get bigger budgets and physical releases compared to the Xbox Live Arcade era where they were merely digital only. But one thing I always notice is how the value of these games always seem to be lower. Mega Man 11 was only $30, Sonic Mania was $20, yet these games are far better and give me so much more to do than something like the Resident Evil 3 remake. So yeah, while 2D games are a bit more straightforward and shorter most of the time, I'd rather be spending that entire 5-hour playtime actually playing the game rather than for half of it watching cutscenes that are available on YouTube, or even when I am playing the game, it's literally just holding the stick up as the character's walking and talking. That's not every 3D game, believe me, I love both of these styles equally, and for how often 3D games have filler, 2D games aren't exciting and too safe, you know, it kind of balances out. But the idea that a 2D game shouldn't be priced at $60, have you seen what you're buying? How is this, and this, and this, and this worth 60, hell, even 70? But Metroid Dread isn't worth 60. It's up to the consumer to decide how much they're willing to spend on a game. If a certain title isn't worth 60 to you, well, it isn't worth 60 to you, that's fine. But to denounce a game's price entirely based on it not having a Z-axis is a little ridiculous in my opinion. 2D gaming has gone from handheld only to dominating Nintendo's entire lineup to being in a great balance with 3D titles. I love I can see games from the same franchise on the same console, both released via physical media at the same price, but from two completely different dimensions. And then I'd say, what a family reunion! Where did everybody go?
I'm winning. If you really want to win this, we should do the freeze-drive ritual!
Silence! TBH, the elixir!
Elixir? I brought Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper is the elixir.
Dr. Vanderspiegel. Glad to have you back in patients. Speech!
Get out of my house.
My people are coming to kill everyone.
You have to do something about this. You're an alien. Phone home.
You have no idea who you are dealing with.
I think we might have gotten off on the wrong foot.
You know, this shit's getting weird.
Hey y'all, Scott here. I realize today's youth is way into getting corrupted, so it's only fair to give every possible good or service an age-appropriate rating. Introducing the Food Eating and Ratings Association, or FEAR for short, where we give all food on the market a rating so you can decide if it's right for you and your kids. E for edible, R for ranch, and ITLFN. It tastes like nickels.
Rated everyone 10 and up.
What I would give to win a sweepstakes dinner with that guy. The ESRB, the narcs who made us play Simpsons Hit and Run instead of Grand Theft Auto 3. They played a major role in helping to mitigate some video game controversies, even when there's been more of them after the rating system was established. Media has always been under scrutiny for being bad influences on our youth. Television, film, music, literature, all have had countless controversies surrounding them in terms of content. Rock and roll was thought to corrupt the youth when it debuted. Schindler's List was broadcast on network television unedited. You can tell that ruffled a few feathers. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins were both rated PG and featured some not so PG elements, and I'm still not allowed to read Catcher in the Rye. But video games were always seen as the worst of all those mediums. With a violent movie, you're watching a killer. With a violent video game, you are the killer. There have been so many controversies surrounding games. Pinball machines were outlawed for a while due to being considered gambling, leading to 70s arcade games facing outcry, the game Death Race shocking many for its portrayal of running over gremlins. Gotcha's controls were designed to look like Custer's Revenge on Atari 2600, doing the whole Custer's Revenge thing. And as the years went on, technology advanced, and violent video games weren't, oh, it kinda looks like you're killing people. They were more like video games as a whole were leading up to that moment. Video games were becoming more graphic and thus raised more eyebrows. In the arcade, games like Splatterhouse just rubbed blood and gore into your face. Narc was an incredibly violent one where you blew up dozens of people, but they were all drug dealers and the game had an anti-drug message. And of course, Mortal Kombat. The fighting game craze started with Street Fighter II in 1991, and a year later, Mortal Kombat came out and had to stand out from the crowd. It utilized digitized graphics, which looked insane at the time. It was so realistic. But also to help it stand out, it had a little help from our friend Gore. The game already caused tons of controversy due to this, but it was multiplied exponentially when the game made its way to home consoles, especially the Sega Genesis. Positioning the Sega Genesis as the more adult console, Sega felt the need to live up to that reputation by allowing more mature games on the system while also imposing less censorship than Nintendo. This was famously done with the home versions of Mortal Kombat. While both the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis versions initially lacked the blood and gore of the arcade version, all you had to do on the Genesis was enter in that sweet, sweet cheat code to enable it. While this made the Genesis port a hit with kids, it didn't bode well with parents and even the US government. December 9th, 1993 was the day a congressional hearing was held to discuss violent video games and a potential system to rate the games based on their content and themes. Mortal Kombat was a major talking point alongside the games Lethal Enforcers, Night Trap, and later on Doom. Yeah, the content in these games were more mature than others, but a lot of the examples of things these games did that went too far feel a bit over-exaggerated. Lethal Enforcers used a blue toy gun and had you shooting bad guys as a police officer. Night Trap was a full-motion video game for the Sega CD that was as harmless as a lame direct-to-video B-movie. And Mortal Kombat, yeah, I have no excuse for that one. Representatives for Nintendo and Sega were present, with Nintendo's Howard Lincoln standing strong and just throwing Sega under the bus, acting like Night Trap was the most heinous thing ever constructed by man.
Obviously, it would not pass our guidelines. This game, which as you've indicated promotes violence against women, simply has no place in our society.
This scene from Night Trap was the one everybody got up in arms about. You can't look at this scene and say, oh man, this is poisoning the minds of our youth. Like, what's going on here? To anyone watching this scene, it looks like a bunch of burglars are pumping a girl's neck with some machine, which led to everybody saying, I don't know what's going on, but I don't like it. Even though at the time of the hearing there would be no technical way for Night Trap to run on a Nintendo console, Lincoln made one thing very clear.
And let me say that for the record, I want to state that Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system.
Nintendo wasn't immune to criticism during the hearing, but Sega was getting absolutely slaughtered, mainly due to the significant increase in mature themes with games on Sega platforms. With Mortal Kombat's Blood and their own game Night Trap, they had it rough that day. In their defense, Sega initiated their own rating system a few months before the hearing. GA for general audiences, MA13 for 13-year-olds and older, and MA17 for 17-year-olds and older. They were blasted for possibly only using a rating system to fight the backlash and due to the age ratings being too vague, even though the ESRB ratings are basically the same thing!
This is a copy of the packaging. There was no rating on this game at all when the game was introduced. Small children bought this at Toys R Us, and he knows that as well as I do. When they started getting heat about this game, then they adopted the rating system and put ratings on it.
While a lot of the arguments made during this time were obviously kind of uninformed and pretty silly, it simply made sense for video games to receive content ratings just like movies and television, especially considering the drastic differences between content and games. They weren't necessarily trying to censor games, rather making sure consumers were aware of what they were buying. More hearings were held later in 1994, and it was agreed upon most game companies to initiate a game rating system, with major retail outlets making it clear they would not buy games without a rating. That year would see the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, or the ESRB, an organization that gives video games age-appropriate ratings. Developers send in videos of their projects showcasing standard gameplay and what could be deemed more objectionable content to receive one of initially 5 ratings: early childhood, kids to adults, teen, mature, or adults only. Later in 1998, kids to adults was renamed to everyone, and in 2005 the new everyone 10 and up rating was introduced with Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, because this game couldn't have possibly been rated E for everyone. That's ridiculous. Later, the design of the ratings changed to pure black letters, with a slight design revision in 2013. Good? Remember these spray paint stencil designs? There's something oddly charming about the old school look of these ratings, especially the K to A one, even though I definitely prefer E for everyone, as it's way more straightforward and clear. Back during the GameCube, PS2, and Xbox era, it felt like there was a nice variety of games rated E, T, and M. Nowadays, it feels more like it's everything or nothing. Honestly, how many times have you seen a T-rated game this generation? Of course, there's the elusive EC and AO. EC is fairly uncommon, mainly used on edutainment games on the PC. ESRB's website claims that only 289 games have been given the rating. On the exact opposite side of the spectrum, Adults Only is by far the rarest rating, with only 27 games rated as such. Now, there's really not a ton of games rated AO for a few reasons, one of them being the fact that most AO rated games are basically Another being the fact that all console manufacturers have a policy against AO games, stating that they aren't allowed on the platforms, and similarly, most retail chains won't carry products rated AO. This is the main reason we don't see the rating too often. If developers actually want to sell their game and it happens to get rated AO, they have to go in there and change some things up. More recently, the game Agony received the rating, and the developers had to tone the violence down to go full-on M-rated so it could be released on consoles. Due to the Big Three's policies, the majority of AO games have only appeared on PC, exceptions being the Philips CDI and a DVD game. However, we do have 2 more examples of AO games on consoles, one being Thrill Kill on the PS1. The game got hit with an AO rating, but never released commercially. You can find the ROM online crazy easily though. The other one was... Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, so that's why CJ isn't in Smash Brothers. After the game's released, an unfinished sex scene was found in the game's files, later dubbed as the Hot Coffee mod. It wasn't accessible without hacking the game, but people were angry, even though the game was already rated M. And like I said, it wasn't accessible without hacking. It was nothing special. You get the same experience from watching 2 action figures going at it, but it was a big enough deal that the game was re-rated AO and pulled from shelves, which led to Rockstar re-releasing the game to re-achieve an M rating, which is why you'll see many copies of San Andreas with 2nd edition written on them. A similar situation went down with Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, where a random somebody made a nude mod for the game. And it was discovered deep within the game's files existed the art the mod used for the nudity. That was uncalled for. Nowadays, it feels like more mature content is getting the pass within lower age ratings. Indigo Prophecy's unedited PC release was originally given an AO rating, but recently with the release of an uncensored remastered version, it was given an M. Also, Galgun Double Peace is a game where you shoot pheromones at girls and it's rated E for everyone. Guys, society finally accepts us. It was a misprint. Sometimes a game's rating can leave you perplexed, like, how the how are so many Kirby games rated E10+? Like, I get it, Kirby games can get kind of intense, but too intense for a 7-year-old? Games in series well known for being one specific rating can change things up at a moment's notice, and it weirds me out. Dark Souls? Oh yeah, big M-rated series. Oh, okay, Batman Arkham series. Well, Phoenix Wright, oh come on. Fight Night, an EA Sports title, easy contender for family fun, Jesus. When you look at this, ESRB.org has a description of content found in games that could be objectionable. I gotta say, many M-rated games definitely have a hearty dose of With ESRB being around for nearly 25 years, it's maintained its place as one of the most important aspects of the gaming industry. That, with the inception of digital games, kids can buy as many M-rated games as they want. Like, kid walks into the store, buys PlayStation Network bucks, goes home, buys Bloody McSex Scene the game, and becomes Genghis Khan. Like, come on, I thought we got rid of that guy. Disregarding that, so many parents just buy their kids M-rated games with no second thought. They just don't look at the ratings and then blame the game for being too vulgar for their kids. Why don't you actually be a parent and regulate what media your child consumes rather than blaming the media itself? Different people are into different things, meaning not every piece of media produced is gonna be G-rated. That's true concerning everything, especially video games. Most video games that garner controversy for being unsuitable for children are already rated M. But is that ever brought up when all these big shots who know nothing about video games talk about how video games are corrupting society? No, they just talk about how the newest Call of Duty is poisoning our children when, guys! It's absolutely ridiculous how hard it is for people to notice the bold black letter in the corner of these games. Well, I'm taking a stand. We need to expand the size of these things. It's for the kids.
Hi, I'm the Black Hokage. You could game with any network that never stopped gaming, or just G4. Before I moved to LA, I considered calling myself the Florida Hokage, but I don't get day drunk enough.
Hi, I'm Kasim G. You could game with any network that never stopped gaming, or just G4. People say I'm the most handsome G4 host, and I've asked both my parents.
Hi, my name is Kevin Pereira. You could game with any network that never stopped gaming, or just G4. Sometimes, I wonder if my entire life is in a snow globe, inside a YouTube Let's Play.
You could game with any network that never stopped gaming, or just G4. My favorite League of Legends character? The sexy one with weird ears.
Hi, my name is Avali May. You could game with any network that never stopped gaming, or just G4. My life is like a dating simulator coded by my mortal enemy.
My name is Gerard Khalil. You could game with any network that never stopped gaming, or just G4. Life is a speed run that beats you.
You could game with any network that never stopped gaming, or just with G4. Can you guys add like the Disney? People tell me I look like a young Kurt Cobain, played by an average-looking sketch comedian.
Hey all, Scott here. You know what I love about video games? Connecting a controller, parental controls, airplane mode, screen burn-in reduction, auto sleep. and that's it. It's a brand new console. Wanna play a game? No! You ever just turn on a game console, stare at the menu screen, and not know what to do? Playing a game takes a lot of work. I just turned on my Xbox to give my thumb something to do for 5 minutes, keep them stimulated. It's like, I get the feeling that I'm bored, but I'm too bored to have a preference of what to do with that boredom, and I have too many choices of what game to play, so I just end up not playing anything. But see, some game consoles have you covered. If you need to wean your thumbs, why not nurse them on system settings? Hopefully there's nobody living inside this thing. Pre-installed software. It's like an activity book for elderly children. See, originally, if you turn on your game system without a game in it, you'd get... I thought I was gonna see a clock. But now you get a fancy-ass menu. Sure, it now takes longer to enter a game. What used to take a flick of a switch takes a few more button presses and far more self-doubt. But having a menu system actually allows us to have far more options than ever before. Internet connections, setting up calendars, holy... But of course, these are mainly just options. What about applications included just for fun? Yeah, opening up the Nintendo DS and seeing a little option called PictoChat, you could draw whatever you want in crotches. And the Nintendo 3DS upped the ante quite a bit, featuring full-on minigames to play that were just automatically included on the system. You didn't have to download or install anything. You could play Face Raiders, AR games, Street Pass, and on top of that, you had other features like a camera, an audio recorder, even this little thing where you could write your own notes. It was nuts. However, the system with a menu setup and pre-installed software I remember the most fondly will always be the Nintendo Switch. Yeah! The Nintendo Wii is a close second. This thing had such a fun menu to explore back in the day, mostly due to the Wii channels it housed. Calling them channels was definitely to make them feel more like TV stations and to give us a false sense of security, but these were applications for the Wii, and this was one of the first game consoles to have a cavalcade of pre-installed goodies to sniff, which made productivity a bitch. I got places to be, but that damn forecast channel's calling my name! So when we turn the Wii on, we're greeted to... I never read this. Warning, health and safety. Before playing, read your operations manual for important information about your health and safety. Wow, I never would have known! Is this really necessary every time you boot up the console? I mean, yes, it's I don't want to get sued necessary if somebody decided I didn't see a warning screen, I'm gonna eat my Wii. But actually reading this text, it says nothing. Hey, here's a warning about your health and safety. Read about your health and safety, and thus it's time to hit the A button to proceed. I'm home. This is the Wii menu. It's got the rounded rectangles and the static, the music that's not really music, the button orbs. Oh, it's got one of those. The Wii menu is an excellent user interface. Just by looking at it, you know exactly what it's thinking. Many game consoles at the time had UIs that were, I don't know, honestly, a bit confusing. I mean, once you start fiddling around with them, you get it, but the Wii was instantly understandable while maintaining some depth. But you know what I never liked? This little section. Of course, standing here, it looks fine. Nice even. But then when we go between the different screens, like, am I the only one that thinks this animation looks weird? Like, the perspective of where this section is in relation to this section makes me squirm. To those who said, gosh, I wish Scott bitched more, well, there you go, I don't like the shape. Each Wii channel is supposed to represent a television channel, kind of like you're in a studio or a security office with a bunch of TVs on at once. Empty slots for more channels have the Wii static, and if you want to customize where things are, just grab an existing channel with the A and B buttons and join the resistance. I always like the stock setup though, the disc channel, me channel, photo channel, shop channel in that order. Well, let's go through all of these, starting with the disc channel. No. Discs? Who would have thought? And they're mobile! This is what we select to play whatever game's in the Wii. Of course, for the Wii models with GameCube slots, we see a GameCube disc thrown in the mix. I like when it reads the disc, we see him spin, and if it doesn't read it, we get a really nice you. When a Wii disc loads up, they almost always have these fun splash screens with music and an animation on the Wii menu itself. But it always bummed me out that with the GameCube games, they play the little GameCube startup jingle and show the logo, but it's not animated. Like, come on, you couldn't show the full GameCube startup animation here? It's also crazy annoying how if you want to play a GameCube game, you can't control the Wii menu with a GameCube controller. You have to use a Wii remote to select the disc channel and then swap over to the GameCube controller to play the game. There's no reason for this. If you plug a class controller into the Wii remote, you can control the menu with just the analog sticks. Why can't you do that with the GameCube controller? The disc channel is the worst! Of course, with models of the Wii that don't feature GameCube support, the Wii disc is all by itself here. Again, this channel. Well, let's see if whatever's to the right of this thing can top it. is this a revolt? The Mii Channel, easily one of the biggest wastes of time to ever indulge in, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. So first up, the Mii name is brilliant, flipping over a portion of the Wii name to make something completely different. Now, you could flip the other half, but I don't know what a screaming W is gonna do for you. A Mii is a virtual representation of a U. With the Mii Channel, we have limitless possibilities to make our Mii look like our Mii. As long as the mount doesn't go bigger than this. The Mii Channel was a game in itself. Sure, it really was nothing more than a simple character creator, but with how social and accessible the Wii system is, it's just plain fun to sit down with friends and whip up some quick Miis. I really take Mii making seriously. One of the best compliments somebody could give you is, "Damn, your Mii's pretty hot." And when we save the little thing, we can name them, give them a birthday, favorite color, turn on sharing, or mingling as it's called. I never did this either, but if I really cared about the Mii I made, yes, of course I'm open to polyamory. You can label it as a favorite of yours, which boils down to the color of their pants. Yeah, Dad, you're going in the rest of the pile. Now, Tan Dad, that's going in my favorites. All right, final question. Oh, do we want this Mii to mingle? I swear to God, if I can crossbreed my Miis. Now, actually, to mingle means you'll let this Mii go to your friends' Mii channels and appear in the Mii Parade. What's the Mii Parade? That. So when you save your Mii, they're plastered in the Mii Plaza, purgatory if you will. You can organize them, grab them by the head, mutilate, or just kill them. And it covers all bases. So yeah, we can arrange them alphabetically by favorites, color, gender. We can only have 100 Miis, which is pretty bogus, but we can store a Mii in our Wii remote. That's barbaric. I've never done this. It's definitely so then you can bring your Miis over to your friend's Wii by connecting your Wii remote. But making Miis is so quick and easy, I just don't see the point. We could send Miis to friends, exactly what I want to receive in the mail. A person. As previously stated, here's the Mii Parade, which is supposed to be this giant conglomerate of Miis you sent to the Mii Parade and Miis your friends sent over, and all they do is walk, and you can speed them up and also give up. Let's not forget you can connect to the Nintendo DS. Now, why would we do that? To use Miis in the 4 Nintendo DS games that used Miis, of course. To be fair, this feature is far more useful with the Nintendo 3DS. This is how you transfer Miis to that system, where it used Miis far more. And after the Wii, most Nintendo systems utilized the little avatars and had their own Mii makers. And while they all had more features and were more robust creation tools than the original Wii application, the Mii Maker peaked on Wii. On the 3DS, that's a handheld. You're in the corner playing that system by yourself. That's no fun to create characters on. The Wii U, not bad, but they separate so much of the creation experience between the TV screen and the gamepad screen. It's not nearly as communal as using the pointer on the Wii. It feels much more like a singular experience. I'm depressed when I make Miis on this system. And then on the Nintendo Switch, so fun. The Wii's Mii Channel has a lot of features that went barely utilized and has quite a few limitations, but it is still, by far, the most fun character creator out there. It has so much personality with the music and the Mii Plaza, and the Wii Remote's pointer makes it so intuitive and such a blast to create Miis with people in the same room. Well, it's gonna take a lot to follow that up. And this is a lot. The Photo Channel. Funny story, the Wii has an SD card slot. Now, what can you do with it? The Photo Channel. So we can import our digital camera or cell phone photos via an SD card, or we can take a look at photos left on the Wii message board. Yeah, the right dot. I loved looking through my Wii message board. I mean, all it pretty much did for me was tell me how long I played my Wii on that day, so at this point it's basically a wall of hieroglyphics. Some games would send a hearty congratulations to the Wii message board for doing things, or you could just straight up send certain pictures to it, like your list of accomplishments in Mario Galaxy. You could also use it to send messages to friends. I never learned to do that. I mean, back in the day, my friends and I weren't too keen on swapping Wii info to do this, so I never got to experience a lot of that side of online connectivity. But I still like going on the message board to ask, what the hell am I doing? But those pictures from the message board could double as pictures to abuse in the Photo Channel. This is honestly such a well done application. I mean, for the time, being able to show off any photos or videos on an SD card on your TV like this was pretty wild. You can even play a slideshow with all the photos with all different kinds of music, including your own. I know what I'm doing at my funeral. Oh my god, the fun option! We can add some filters here and go in and doodle all over it. If we move the Wii Remote closer and farther away from the sensor bar, we can increase and decrease our brush size. And stickers and scissors and a nuke, this is basically a new version of Mario Paint from the Super Nintendo. In fact, many elements of the Photo Channel are direct references to that old game. And then we can create a puzzle out of our photo, which is just a blast to do with images like this. Give me a second on this one. I love the Photo Channel. It was such a fun way to experience your photos. You know what wasn't a fun way to experience your photos? The Wii Shop Channel. The worst photo experience on Wii.
What's the recipe for surprising the kids, treating yourself, and ditching dish duty? You're looking at it. Order your Pizza Hut faves like original pan, original stuffed crust, and more at pizzahut.com. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
Come on, guys, let's get the W.
I'm winning.
If you really want to win this, we should do the
Freeze-Drive Ritual! Silence! TBH, the elixir!
Elixir? I brought Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper is the elixir.
Pizza Hut stuffed crust is the crust that made crust good. Topped and stuffed with over a half-pound of cheese. What are you so afraid of? Loving it? Original stuffed crust, just $12.99. Only from Pizza Hut. No one out-pizzas the Hut.
E is the only place Hollywood icons would send their kids to work.
Dude, are you kidding me?
Wednesdays on E.
Today, breeding season. Nope, I will not be doing that.
8 celebrity kids.
These are the shoes I was telling you about. The Prada ones? They're perfect for the ranch, right?
Famous parents.
My dad is Shaquille O'Neal.
Your dad is like worldwide.
0 life skills.
I don't touch sheep. I don't ride horses.
Oh my God, what are you doing?
Giddy up for relatively famous ranch rules. Wednesdays at 9, only on E.
What's better than the photo channel? Nothing, but on the Wii Shop channel we can download even more Wii channels. If it were 2009. Yeah, that's an issue with a fair amount of Wii channels now. They require the internet to not only download them to your Wii system, but also access. And with most of the Wii's internet access being shut down, we're a little thing I like to call Thankfully, I have a wonderful thing called the Time Capsule with old footage of the Wii Shop channel on it. Yeah, this is great. The Wii Shop channel let us purchase and download classic virtual console games, brand new downloadable only WiiWare games, and obviously, more Wii channels. Most of the downloadable Wii channels were free of charge, though some cost a small fee. Specifically, the Internet channel, a surefire way to browse the internet on the Wii. Let's get down to it. I bought a used Wii off of eBay that I clearly saw still had various Wii channels loaded onto it. If you boot up Wii mode on a Wii U, for some reason they got rid of access to the photo channel, and on my old personal Wii, I don't have a lot of these old channels anymore for some reason. This one had all kinds of goodies on it, like the Internet channel, or at least a trial version of it. This would cost you 500 Wii points, or $5 US. Was it worth it? Who pays for a web browser? I believe eventually it went full-blown free, but I remember paying for it, and at the time, it was pretty cool. Much like viewing photos on the TV, viewing the Google homepage, now that was magical. It wasn't a very powerful browser, nor was it good, but it did the job. YouTube worked on it, and back in 2008, that was one of the few ways to watch online video on your TV. But the thing is, browsing the internet with the Wii was a total gimmick. It was just a neat little novelty, which didn't make a ton of sense. The only things you could really do on the Internet channel was go on websites like Wikipedia or CNN. You couldn't do fun things like play Flash games or use more elaborate websites, which at that point, why use your Wii to browse the web if you can't do fun internet stuff on it? You were basically limited to reading articles. So why not use your computer? To be fair, various sites were created with the Internet channel's limitations in mind, and with those you could play simple games, listen to music, watch videos outside of on YouTube. There was still a decent amount you could do with this channel. Now, is it usable today? No, and surprisingly yes. The internet's aged a lot in the past 10 years, and most web pages are too much for the Internet channel to handle. I mean, even back then they were too much for the Internet channel to handle. I can't tell you how many times I got this out of memory error, not only now, but back in the day. You just have to keep reloading and hope for the best. However, it still does technically work if you throw it a softball. I was able to go on Google. And next up we have channels that need no introduction. The Forecast channel, the News channel. Okay, news and forecasts are no more. No wonder nothing's happened the past few years. These two channels were preloaded on my original Wii when I first got it, and they what? Gave news and weather forecasts. Good. See, ever since summer of 2013, Wii Connect 24 was discontinued. This was a feature of the Wii which allowed it to continuously connect to the internet while in standby mode, basically letting the forecast and news channels update, allowing you to receive messages from friends, getting system updates, all of that. I never knew the blue light that would pulsate from the disk slot was letting me know I received a message. Well, you'd think that means we can't access these Wii channels anymore. Wrong, we can access them with a hacked Wii. So we can't access them. Yes, you were looking at the one-time champion of two stupid to use a hacked Wii. Listen, I wanted to play Wii Dare, it was a European game, so I hacked my Wii, tried to load it through that, it would get past the Ubisoft logo, freeze, I ended up just buying a European Wii U. If I can't do something as simple as play a European game, how do you expect me to play something that doesn't technically exist anymore? Well, I can sure as hell try. There's a fan continuation of Wii Connect 24 called Reconnect 24. Let me see if I can handle this. I can just look at old footage. The Forecast channel gave you the weather, you could check out this globe, and the overall user experience was quite detailed for a simple weather forecast. These Wii channels are almost like precursors to smartphone apps, but in many ways, they're just as feature-rich, if not more so. I mean, look at the news channel. Yep, that's the news. Similarly to the Forecast channel, it uses the same globe you can spin around to find what's happening around the world and even put together a slideshow of the biggest articles. These two channels aren't nearly as fun as the others, but serve their purpose, and if Nintendo really wanted to hit home that these applications were channels for whatever reason, it just made sense to have news and weather incorporated. But what about the election? The Everybody Votes channel was a channel all about polls, and it still works. I mean, it would be updated with new polls to participate in all the time, but now all it can do is read back data from polls you previously took part in. Like I said, this was a used Wii I bought, so I can use this to get some insight into the past owners. Like, find out how long they think they can hold their breath. I won't look, I'll respect their privacy. Well, if the Everybody Votes channel is usable, what about the Check Me Out channel? It's not even downloaded. Why did these people download Everybody Votes but refuse to download Check Me Out? This channel really took the idea of people making really elaborate Miis and ran with it, letting people upload their Miis for others across the world to download to their own console and also participate in Mii contests. I downloaded a couple from back in the day. These two channels were neat little distractions, but I only used them a couple of times. There's only so many hundred ways a Mii can wow me, and after voting on a few polls, I kinda just stopped caring. But then there was the Nintendo channel, a channel dedicated to showing off trailers for Wii and Nintendo DS games, and even offered demos for Nintendo DS games you could beam to the handheld, which was crazy. I played the demo for Personal Trainer Cooking that way, because I just didn't know if it was for me. Plus, Nintendo hosted their own show on the service called Nintendo Week. I mean, again, for the time, having all these videos available via your Wii console was really cool. But how do you do it? Well, Nintendo preloaded the Wii Plus Internet channel on some Wiis, showing the benefits of connecting it online. I never had this channel on my Wii, but it just so happened to only be a 4-minute long video where you'd entered it, and that exact video is available on this promotional DVD I have. Thank God, I was gonna blow it.
Did you know you can connect your Wii console to the internet?
Yep. It's just a simple infomercial on pretty much everything we just talked about. Is it worth getting pissed about if it was never preloaded on your Wii? Yeah, but at least owning it on DVD, I can play with it. So that's pretty much all of the Wii channels that were available. Except the Wii Fit channel. You can install this through owning Wii Fit and it allowed you to weigh yourself and check your stats without putting the disc in. Mario Kart channel, same idea, installed through Mario Kart Wii, let you check in with your online stats without popping the disc in. Wii Speak channel, you can only download this through a download code offered after buying a Wii Speak. You could then talk to other friends with a Wii Speak. I only talk to people who own a Wii Speak anyway, so this was perfect for me. Jam with the Band Live channel, a channel only available in Europe and Japan for the DS game Jam with the Band. It let you play the game's audio through the TV speakers. The Rabbids channel, a channel installed through Rabbids Go Home. It was like Check Me Out channel, but with Rabbids. You could post your Rabbit and rate out the Rabbids. It was pointless. Netflix, Hulu Plus, YouTube, Amazon Video, Crunchyroll, even though this channel wasn't available under Wii channels and instead was available under WiiWare. Metroid Prime 3 preview channel, which was only available for a limited time, and loads of channels that weren't even close to releasing in my neck of the woods. Television Friend channel G Guide, basically a TV guide developed by HAL Laboratory, only in Japan. The Digicam Print channel, only in Japan, basically the photo channel, but through Fujifilm you could order prints of your photos. Today and Tomorrow channel in Japan and Europe, some kind of fortune-telling horoscopish stuff. We No Mod channel, only in Japan, a video-on-demand service with exclusive content for Wii. Demade channel, only in Japan, a channel that let you order real-life food. BBC iPlayer channel, Love Film Instant channel, Kirby TV channel, but of course, There was the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword save data update channel. There was a game-breaking bug found in the game, and since the Wii could barely even spell the word update, they had to release a Wii channel to fix this. For users that didn't have the internet, Nintendo would have them send their Wii system in, Jesus. Then there's the Wii U transfer tool for transferring your info from a Wii to a Wii U. Like they had this cute Pikmin animation of them bringing your stuff over. It totally makes up for them never bringing over DeMay. And that's pretty much every Wii channel. Sure, if you're playing on a Wii U, there's the Wii U menu channel, takes you back to the Wii U menu, and then there's the Wii menu manual channel, but I don't take labeling anything as a Wii channel lightly. The Wii gave me hours of enjoyment even when I wasn't playing a game, and I have these Wii channels to thank for that. Now, how many hours in total? Oh my god. Me using the photo channel can finally drink!